Okay, welcome to our, let me try this one. We're going to get together. Hello? Yes? All right. Welcome to our pretreatment stakeholder group. This is the second meeting, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, of our group, and we're still excited about all of you coming to talk to us about pretreatment. It's certainly a very important program for us, as obviously for you all. And so we have a full agenda to talk about, some things left over from last time, and then also some new updates. This group is really important to me because we want to have a very interactive discussion with the pretreatment stakeholders. You guys do so many important things, and so I'm excited. So we'll kick it off. I'll let Erica start, and then we'll follow up with some. Either Dave and I will take care of the second and third things on the agenda. Okay?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Again, my name is Erica Crespo, the pretreatment team leader here at the TCEQ. And I believe that we do have to go through introductions of everyone. So, of course, thank you so much, our Deputy Director of the Office of Water, L'Oreal Stepney. I have my section manager of the wastewater permitting section, Vana Miramontes. And I'd like to introduce my staff, if I could, before we turn it over to the audience for you all to introduce yourselves. And again, thank you so much for coming. Bridget Malone, our senior pretreatment coordinator on the team. Jessica Alcocer, our pretreatment technical leader. Then we have Erin Darling, Dr. Erin Darling, I'm so sorry. She's a pretreatment coordinator on the team. Maria Benitez, she's also a pretreatment coordinator. I also have Anna Moorhead, a pretreatment coordinator. Tammy Jiraki, did I say your last name right? Perfect. Tammy is also a pretreatment coordinator that we have on staff. And then also Colleen Cook. She joined us at the beginning of the month, and we're so glad to have her. In addition to our staff members, full-time, we have a couple UTA contractors that are doing amazing work with us. Eric Smith, one of our contractors. Alexia Beal, one of our contractors. Then we have Layla Irene. Excellent. Layla is one of our contractors. And then also we have Janera. She is not with us today. And then now can we go ahead and turn it over to the audience? Oh, Travis, you are one of our amazing staff members, another pretreatment team leader in the Water Quality Division.
Yeah, and I want to remind everyone, if you are going to ask a question, please wait for a microphone to come around so that our webcast attendees can listen to that question. And for those of y'all who are attending via webcast, if you have questions during the meeting, please send an email to outreach@tceq.texas, spelled out, .gov. And we will do our best to address your question either during the meeting or after. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marisa Cage. I'm with TCEQ, Customer Information Assistance Team.
My name is Marisa Cage with City of Dallas.
Joseph Fielding, City of Dallas.
Jennifer Moore with the Trinity River Authority.
Lali Joseph, City of Fort Worth.
Rob Robbins, City of Fort Worth.
Michelle Janeka, City of Fort Worth. Stephanie Nykirk, City of Fort Worth.
Robert Ramirez, City of Fort Worth.
Danielle Monroe, TCEQ.
Janet Sims, Perkins Engineering.
Carol LaBreche, City of Houston.
Naranga Gamge, City of Houston.
Denise Ehrlich, Gulf Coast Authority.
Jeff Sadis, Sadis and Seals.
Lisa Cox, City of Brownwood.
Henry Weed, City of Brownwood.
Remington Berkland, Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Martin Miller, San Antonio Water System.
Lauren Thomas, Lloyd Gosselink.
Sarah Thornton, Lloyd Gosselink.
Kristen Zuprovo, North Texas. Brooke Nowak, North Texas Municipal Water District.
Joe Duke, North Texas Municipal Water District.
Eddie King, City of Irving.
Peter Reale with Plummer.
Rame, City of Pflugerville.
Cindy Pierce, City of Pflugerville.
Matt Johns, City of Pflugerville.
Matt Woodard with City of Pflugerville. Crespo Plummer.
City of Conroe.
Lee Flores, TCEQ.
Samuel Glinsky with the Texas Department of Transportation.
Heather Wilson Ellis, City of Temple.
Carrie Weir, City of Temple.
Brian Bourne, City of Round Rock.
Jeff Foreman, City of Round Rock.
David Galindo, Director of the Water Quality Division.
Okay, thank you all so much. And again, thank you for coming. We look forward to the topics that we have on the agenda for today. And I think you all should have copies of the 3 handouts, the agenda, the draft FAQ that we have for control authorities, as well as the fact sheet for the EPA proposed revisions to 40 CFR Part 423.
Does anybody need a copy? Okay.
And so now we're going to go ahead and jump into the updates that we have from the last stakeholder meeting in September. And so, Bridget, can you go ahead and talk about the FAQ for the dental rule?
Sure. So obviously last stakeholder meeting, we presented a draft FAQ for the control authorities regarding the EPA dental amalgam rule. And outside of the discussion during the meeting, we received additional correspondence from 2 commenters on the draft guidance document. We went ahead and revised the FAQs to provide additional clarity based on the discussion and comments we received, which were specifically addressing the concerns raised on the use of the more sensitive analytical methods for mercury testing and calculation requirements for SNC. So if y'all want to review the revised FAQs and provide any additional comments on them to us by no later than Thursday, February 20th, we can take those into consideration as well.
Were there any major changes or concerns that the stakeholders had?
Yes, ma'am, there were. During the discussion, when we proposed using the more stringent analytical test methods for mercury, there were concerns about the sampling procedures as well as the cost. And so we definitely took that under consideration, and we revised the FAQ accordingly. And so that requirement is no longer there for control authorities. So you'll see that revision in the FAQ that we have handed out, which is also posted on our stakeholder website. All of these handouts are available for those of you who are participating remotely. And then the other major changes, we just clarified the significant non-compliance calculations and what programs need to do if they do choose to enforce against any dental offices regulated under the rule.
I guess any initial feedback about, what was it, the mercury methodology as well as the enforcement procedures? So I assume that everyone is think that's a good thing that that methodology has been clarified, I would assume. Yes, okay. And then the compliance part?
So that was one of the comments that we did receive, was just clarification on how to calculate SNC regarding any regulation adding on these new industrial users. And so we tried our best to clarify that concern, which is one of the comments that we received. But if not, we are definitely open to any additional feedback or questions regarding what we presented to you guys today.
So they'll have, what, an extra month, and then we'll finalize that?
Yes, ma'am, that's the plan. So if you wouldn't mind emailing, you're more than welcome to email me directly any questions, comments, or concerns that you have, or you can do the wqpreets@tceq.texas.gov. But we would like to have everyone's, questions or comments by Thursday, February 20th, which is about a month. So if there aren't any additional questions or comments or concerns regarding our FAQ document that we've presented, we'd be more than happy to move on to the second update that we have on the agenda, which is addressing the TIPD's permit effluent requirements regarding pretreatment programs.
So a number of stakeholders had asked the question regarding the influent and effluent testing requirements in our pretreatment program, which we've consistently required regular influent and effluent testing. And this comes from our memorandum of agreement with EPA, where we spelled out how we were going to handle the influent and effluent testing. And so we received feedback both in favor of making changes to the influent and effluent testing, either removing some of the parameters or reducing the frequency of testing. And then we also had some comments that were in support of the current testing regimen. And so, you know, we spent a significant amount of time on this, giving this really a lot of consideration. We looked at changing some of the frequency of the testing, and then also at removing some parameters. And so our latest proposal, we had proposed to remove some pesticides from the sampling, and we had sent that to EPA. EPA had some concerns with that request and actually had some questions for us, kind of the same questions that we had when we embarked on this, and that is, you know, with what we were looking at was reducing the pesticide sampling to once every 3 years. And so EPA had some concerns, and they had some questions. So we'll be following up with them on those questions. But currently, where we are right now, you know, and the comments asked to give consideration for these changes due to the cost of the testing, and then also we had some comments that the past analysis year after year seems to show non-detect on a lot of pollutants, and so you know, at this point we're not at a point where we're going to make any changes to it right now. We are still, like I said, going to work with EPA on this latest round of questions from them, but for now we're leaving it nothing unchanged. So, and we will still take additional comment on that. The next issue that was raised has to do with the technically based local limit guidance documents. And so this has to do with, we had a 1993 guidance document which was in place by Region 6, outlining the process for sampling for your TBLL development. And then later, and we had incorporated that approach in when we had received delegation from EPA, and so that was noted in our MOA as well. Later in 2004, there was a national guidance that came out that allowed for some significant changes to the approach, and so where we are currently is, I think we have a combination of both of those guidance documents in our rules. And so we are, you know, we're continuing to use both of those documents, and that's where we are currently. But what we're trying to avoid is having multiple permittee, or all of our permittees having a different approach to the TBL development. It's trying on staff, or it's more complex for staff to be able to go between the programs when everyone's doing something a little bit different. So we're still open to comments on this, but we don't have a plan forward yet on it.
I know these guys came up and talked to me quite a bit about this issue, and the one thing I kept saying is, I mean, the guidance documents are, you know, almost an inch thick each. So, you know, specifically what is troubling? Because some permittees like 2004, some permittees like 1993, but I'm wondering if there's certain specific issues in those that are most troubling for folks when we're looking at this issue. So I personally would like to know specifically kind of where the rub is versus what we've been talking about is kind of in generalities. 1993, 2004, they both are in our MOA. They both are required in our MOA. And so for us to have a discussion with EPA, I'm really interested in specifically what is most concerning. And because we do have to have a consistent process, or else we'll be accused of being inconsistent. And we want to treat everybody the same. So if you guys could either provide comments or share with me now what specifically is a concern with each one of those.
Chris Ashworth Plummer. I don't think that, while EPA published TBL development guidance in 2004, there's nothing in there that says old guidance shall still stay in place. They published a new guidance because the old guidance was no longer, it was time to update. So if EPA intended to keep something in place, they put it into the 2004 guidance. To maintain something that EPA published in 1993 at TCQ, it's not in the MOA that I can find it. And I don't see the justification for that. If EPA meant to include it in 2004, these provisions, they would have would have put these provisions in the 2004 guidance. So,
yeah, and thank you for that, Chris. And I'm looking at it, and I see the references to both. But that's one thing. But it's very important for pretreatment to collect data so that we all are interested in protecting the plant and ultimately protecting water quality. And so like I said, we've heard from both sides that like both guidance documents. And so I hear you saying EPA nationally published a guide. It's all guidance, right? They published a national guidance document in 2004, and then the region has something more specific that they're still using in their permits. And so, I specifically asked, and that's the feedback I got. You may have gotten something different from EPA. I don't know, but that's the feedback I got. And so, again, technically, what is the issue? That's what I'm interested in knowing. Janet.
Well, one of the things that is in the 1993 memorandum is the requirement to do 6 consecutive day sampling.
Okay.
The 2004 guidance says 7 to 14 for initial programs. It takes into account the routine effluent monitoring that's required in our permit. Mm-hmm. That data should be useful for something other than putting on the annual report. In my opinion, that we spend a lot of money doing routine monitoring of the effluent. That data should be valid and useful for developing of TBLs. And you shouldn't have to do a 7 consecutive day, which is what one of the versions of the TCQ revised 1993 memorandum stated was a 7 consecutive day monitoring event. It felt like that revision wasn't consistent with what EPA intended. It was just kind of an update of the 93 memorandum. However, I do not believe that consecutive day sampling routine should be required anymore, mainly for programs who have established data.
Okay, so this is helpful to me because it's a specific issue. So just to repeat it, you said that there's sampling is required over 6 consecutive days, and then using guidance document 1. Is that correct? And then the other guidance document says 7 to 14 days.
Is recommended for initial
for initial
studies.
Programs. Okay.
However, TCEQ hasn't quite gotten to that point.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that we have to discuss when we submit sampling plans. And I have done a study where we did discuss an alternative approach and didn't require the consecutive day sampling. It was a shorter time period so that we had enough data to actually do the TBLL development.
Okay. I think that's helpful, and I think we should visit about that.
And to be clear, what we call 1993 EPA guidance is not what's in the permit, referenced in the permit. We call it 1993 guidance, but it was modified by EPA post-2004, by TCEQ post-2004 without any acknowledgement. The title still says 1993. It's clearly edited. It's not hidden edit. It's clearly edited, but it does not say that it's a TCEQ edit. It's a post-2004 edit identified as a 1993 EPA guidance. So if you say Region 6 still implements it, they can't be implementing it because that's TCEQ modified document. So there's some misunderstanding, I believe.
Erica, do you know what he's referring to?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I know that we've discussed this before, so thank you, Chris, for bringing that up, and we'll discuss it again. Would you like for me to?
I just want you to explain it.
Okay. So what Chris is talking about is the 1993 guidance memo that we received from EPA Region 6 after the 2004 National Guidance Manual was issued, and it said from 7 to 14 days for initial program development. We took the 1993 guidance memo that requires 6 consecutive days, and we updated it to require 7 consecutive days.
Oh, so this is what Janet's referring to.
Yes, ma'am. So what Janet mentioned about the differences between those 2 guidance documents, Chris is talking about the internal guidance document that EPA initially put out in 1993. We internally revised to account for what the 2004 guidance manual put into place.
Okay. So that's basically what you're referring to? Okay, I got it. Thank you. And we'll get back with you guys on that. So that's helpful. All right, do you want to move on?
Yes, ma'am. So now we can talk about the plan for the approval of the pending program modifications. And so we're actually very proud of this, and so I'm very excited to update you on the progress that we made recently. So back when we had our first pretreatment stakeholder meeting in September 2019, we had 65 program modifications that were pending review and approval. And so the majority of these program modifications were submitted more than a few years ago, and it was when there was staff members that are no longer on the team when those original submissions were made. And so to account for that, my staff and I essentially had to start from the beginning in order to put everything together and complete our understanding. So that's exactly what we did. Our contractors and our full-time staff here, we completed 65 administrative reviews over the summer and early fall, and now we're in the process of completing our technical reviews for these 65 program modification submissions. My staff and I have also reached out and personally called each program to request any revisions or updates in order to expedite our reviews. And we've maintained open communication with everyone throughout this process. Additionally, we have implemented a collaborative workshop approach. And in this method, we reach out to programs to either schedule in-person meetings or conference calls in order to expedite our review. And we do this in an effort to resolve any discrepancies in real time. And so these joint working sessions that we've had, they've minimized the back and forth correspondence, and we found them to be very successful. And so this is an approach that we plan on continuing to implement as we move forward. And so as a result of all of our hard work, both working with you guys, so we appreciate all your support, over the last few months, we've gone from having 65 pending program modifications to now only having 45 pending. And so we've completed over the last 4 months 10% of our universe. 10% have either been approved via the non-substantial modification process, or we've deemed them technically complete. And we are also in the process of working with programs to technically complete about another approximate 18% of our pending program modifications. And so that's what you guys can see in this bar graph here, just showing the work that we've done since September. And so the plan that we have in place is to complete our review of all of the pending program modifications, as well as the new developing pretreatment programs within this fiscal year. So between now and the end of August, we do have a plan in place to do that. And so we greatly appreciate everyone working with us to accomplish this tremendous effort and task. So if you haven't heard from us and you have submitted a pending program modification, please reach out to me directly so that I can provide you with the status of our review. And also please remember to submit any revisions to us addressing the pretreatment team at mail code 148, just so that we can receive and approve and review and process your submissions within a timely manner. That's really important to us. So that's our update so far. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, Jennifer has a question. Then I have a comment.
Mine's not necessarily a question. I just wanted to make a comment that I thought your staff's doing a good job at it. I mean, the conversations that I've had with Jessica and Tammy have been great. It's been a lot of back and forth, good open communication. So it's very refreshing from the past.
Thank you, Jennifer, for saying that. That was going to really be my comment and question. Erica and David and Vonna, they come visit me once a month to talk about pretreatment. I'm sure they're tired of seeing me and answering all my questions. But I appreciate all of their efforts to get us back on track with pretreatment. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty big effort, but they're doing a great job. And we've added resources, we've added contractors, we've added staff, we've hired some more advanced staff, I would say, than our normal entry-level staff. So we have at the office level, at the agency level, we have a real big focus on pretreatment. Eric and I talked about a few months back kind of this new approach where I kind of call it, we all get in the room and us and the applicant and kind of work through. It's almost like you shut the door until we figure out all the issues with the program modification. And certainly it's great when we can do that in person, but we also have new technology, right? Well, it's probably old technology. We can Skype, we can VTC, we can do all of that stuff. But I do think it's important for us to have an interactive discussion. And I know sometimes things have changed since you've submitted the application, and so we want to get that updated, but I think it just runs a lot smoother if we can have these, I think Erica termed them working sessions, but for the people who we've done it, I hear it worked thank you, Jennifer, for that feedback. But if anybody else has any feedback on that, if that's working well or it's not working at all, I would really like to hear that because we're putting quite a bit of effort into it. So if anybody has anything to share about that approach, I'd love to hear it. So. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, L'Oreal. So if there aren't any additional questions or comments or concerns about our plan, we can move on in the agenda.
Oh, I did have one question, Erica. We had talked about, I guess there's a couple of ways of incorporating the modifications into the permit. It can be a staff-initiated amendment on our part, or the applicant can submit a minor modification, or if it's already in-house, we can update the permit. And so can you just talk about that a little bit? And I don't know if we have a preference or the stakeholders have a preference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, L'Oreal, for that question. So what L'Oreal was speaking about is when it comes to incorporating and approving substantial modifications into approved pretreatment programs, that has to be done via TIPD's permit application, that permit action. And so the historical process has been, if there is a TIPD's permit application from one of the covered or the tracking wastewater treatment plants in-house that is currently under review, the pretreatment team will use that permit application, that permit action, to tack on any approval of modifications. Outside of that, it's been done via a staff-initiated amendment that we initiate internally. And so that's very similar to just any staff-initiated amendment for a TIPD's permit application. And I do believe that is our preference going forward when it comes to approving any of these pending substantial modifications that we have in-house regarding pretreatment. There's about 27 or so. I believe about 10 programs are including some optional provisions that at this point in the game we're designating that as being a substantial modification, and then we have 17 technically based local limit redevelopments in-house. So those 27 program modifications will require a TIPD's permit action in order to approve and incorporate into your approved program. And that's the plan. That is ideally what we would like, is to do that via staff-initiated amendment process. But we're open to that feedback. Would you guys possibly prefer to do that, with a permit application? You guys initiate that action, or would you prefer that we take care of it once it reaches that stage, which of course is after the city council approval and you guys submit that final package to us? We would go about that process.
Yeah, it would be helpful to me to know. We just assumed it would be easier for us to do the staff-initiated amendment. There's a Texas Register notice, I think.
Yes, ma'am. So the minor amendment permit application, just outside of pretreatment, those can be published in the Texas Register. However, the federal regulations require public participation for pretreatment programs at the local level. So for the approval process for these modifications, we're required that you guys publish in a local newspaper. Depending on the population, it may have to be in multiple languages, but we can cross that bridge on an individual basis when we get there. But it's something that cannot be done through the Texas Register publication. It has to be done in a local newspaper for pretreatment.
So we would initiate it, and then they would take care of the notice part.
Yes, ma'am. And that will be with the, once we get past the draft permit acceptance and it, you get to the publication of the notice, it will have to be done in the local newspaper.
Okay, so any feedback on that? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my opinion would be we're gonna have like 11 permits or 12. So, and ours are all coming up except for one, I think, renewal next year, 21. So my preference would be to do it during the renewal just because of the cost with all the publications and whatnot, so.
I guess that means that it will be pending for another 2-3 years, and so it makes me just a little nervous. We can talk to you individually.
Yeah, ours have been pending for a while, so we're.
Because we're trying to move things, but. Jennifer, she has one up here, Danielle.
I think from TRA's perspective, because we have gajillion contracting parties, one of the pitfalls that I've been seeing is if streamlining has been approved, they go through council and they haven't been allowed to implement what they've gone through council until the permit comes up for renewal. Some of them have had to sit 5 years, and that puts us in a really weird position with the industries. And I think some contracting parties, some of their attorneys are like, well, it's gone through council, y'all are good to go. So from that perspective, I think we'd be more interested in, as soon as it's approved, being able to implement it as fast as we can.
Okay. That's certainly our preference, but if Control Authority has a different idea, then we probably would need a letter as to why we shouldn't be moving forward. But we can talk to the Control Authority, because it sounds like there may be different dynamics, so we can visit about that. And we can have a conversation. Anybody else? And I can certainly understand, because I think your example was really good, because there's like, you said 12 permits, 11 permits, something like that. Jennifer, you guys probably have more. Oh, 2 programs, okay, okay. So some may have more, some may have less. So if someone has a unique reason why we shouldn't do it, then we can visit about that and work something else out, which we're happy to do.
Okay, well, if there's no more question or comments regarding the plan and how we plan to move forward with these, and again, like L'Oreal said, we'd be more than happy to meet with you individually to discuss it once we get to that phase. But we'll go ahead and move on the agenda. And so the next topic that we have is the discussion on the method update rule. And so, David, would you like to start us off on that?
So the Water Quality Division has been working on the method update rule, and we have a separate work group. We have a separate work group that's going on currently. We had a meeting in September, and so we've received stakeholders' comments, and we're currently going through those comments now. And taking those comments into consideration. There was some, I think we may have said that we were going to start updating applications in January, but we will not be updating any of the MALs until we've responded to all the comments and have given everybody the opportunity to see those, the updated MALs. We know that there's a lot of concerns with some of the MALs that have decreased based on the new MDLs that are out. And so, you know, we're sensitive to this. We know that pretreatment has concerns here. And so, again, we will not be moving forward. There won't be any updated applications, or you won't see those MALs until we've had a chance to vet those completely with stakeholders. Do we have any comments, or do we have any questions on the MUR?
I guess are labs updating their processes based on EPA's new requirements?
Yeah, so the labs will need to update. Well, for the methods that changed, labs will need to get NELAC certified for that, and then be able to demonstrate that they can meet the minimum analytical levels. And then again, we do have the sufficiently sensitive rule in place. So if you may not need to test all the way down to the MAL for your effluent discharges. If you can show compliance with the limit at a higher level, then that analysis is acceptable.
So David, I know, so when did these come out?
This was 2017.
Okay, so
EPA did not give a compliance period with this. And so essentially what we heard from EPA was states were implementing this on their own schedules.
Okay.
Hi. One of the problems with that sufficiently sensitive method in that provision is a lot of people don't know what that is. They don't understand, you know, how to apply text tox calculations, but you also have to consider the 70%, 85% on screening for your permit application. So when you talk about this sufficiently sensitive, I think a lot of the municipalities don't know how to do that, and then the labs don't know how to make adjustments appropriately. So in the proposed MALs, they have the most sensitive method that can achieve the water quality standard, And a lot of those methods are not typically run in Texas for these labs. But they are, you know, pretty low, but they're going to be problematic. And then you have the unknown. Do they have to do it? So that's going to be a big problem, I think, in implementing this, and that's sufficiently sensitive.
So Janet, if you have any recommendations for language that we can put into the IP so that permittees can't, so that they do understand when the sufficiently sensitive applies and when it doesn't apply. Because for permit applications, you essentially have to reach the MAL of the test method, of the approved test method that you use in order to put a 0 down or non-detect for your sampling. The sufficiently sensitive comes into play for discharge permits, where you have a limitation that is above. You may have multiple methods that are approved that would show compliance with the limit. And so you can use any one of those methods. So you're not required to use the most stringent method or achieve the most stringent MAL if you can show compliance with your limit with another approved method.
And I think that's where the problem is. People don't know what that level is. What is the level that will demonstrate compliance with what their discharge limit is? Plus, when you do permit applications, you have that added 70% level that puts a reporting requirement in your permit. And so that's going to be complicated for the municipalities to understand and to figure out. Plus, when programs do their annual reports, they get a new text talks every year. And if your discharge level is moving all the time, then that's going to add another complicated factor into this.
Mm-hmm. So the sufficiently sensitive is going to be based on your actual limits that are in your permit. So that's your target that you're trying to show compliance with the test.
Well, the sufficiently sensitive should also apply to any effluent data that you turn in. If you turn in data to the annual pretreatment report, that's going to be compared to your water quality standard, your text tox value as well. And so if that's a moving target, sufficiently sensitive, I mean, you want to use a method that'll show compliance. If that's moving all the time, then do you really know which method you need to be using? Do you need to be using the most stringent and the most costly method all the time? Because you want to make sure TCEQ doesn't come back and say, hey, you didn't meet it.
Okay, well, we can continue discussions on that and look at ways that we can put language in the implementation procedures so that the permittees do know when to use sufficiently sensitive, when that applies.
And I think another thing is we need to make sure that when you have a text tox calculation, it probably should be good for the full term of your permit and not change every year based on flow conditions in the receiving stream.
That sounds like a new thing.
Yes, and so
well,
thank you so much, Janet, for that proposal. I know that we've historically required programs to request for updated text tox methods because we want to be proactive in pretreatment, and so there may be a certain standard for permit application reviews, but because we want to be protective of constant changing industries within service areas, for pretreatment we have a different frequency for those updates of those text tox reports. But that's definitely something that we can look at and discuss internally. So thank you so much, Janet.
Yeah, I was going to say, what other questions on MALs?
Yeah, I think another thing that we saw, and this is kind of talking on behalf of wheat and also for TRA, I think another issue that we saw with the way it was presented is we can't find labs to run some of those methodologies that were in there to get down to that low level. And the problem is, particularly for the organics, the problem is what we were able to do with one test method is now requiring 3 or 4. So it just drives the expense up even more. It's going to require more training. A lot of it was specialized techniques and collection and preservation. And the thing that we kind of scratch our head at is, you know, here's new methodologies or updated methodologies with 624.1 and 624 or 25.1 and 608.34. Those, you know, now we're having to go back and use methods that are really old. So that was the other thing that we're kind of scratching our heads on. But I think from our perspective, just the amount of more effort when we have to go sample influent effluent is now doubled.
Well, I think first, let me say, we didn't change the federal rules, right? It's EPA. Let me say that first. And so we're trying to figure out how to implement it. It sounds like there's not a compliance schedule, so we have some time to figure out what works best. And Jennifer, you know, if you or whoever wants to come up with a list of things that we haven't thought about for implementation, and that way, I guess, David, these would maybe go in the implementation procedures?
Yeah.
For
so
right now?
we include our MALs in the.
So we'd have to update the list,
yeah.
right? So we're on a schedule for doing that.
Yeah. So we've had meetings with stakeholders. We've proposed some updates to the MALs, and so now we're at the point of just we need to vet those with stakeholders and get information from stakeholders on exactly those types of issues.
I guess the first thing I would suggest is if any of the pre-treatment folks who are interested or a couple of representatives are not a part of that other MAL group, then we want to make sure you get plugged in. That's the first thing. Secondly, if I can appreciate that pre-treatment would just be a little bit different than the discharge to the creek. And so, you know, I know Erica's trying to think of what issues we would run into depending on how we implement it for pre-treatment, but it would be certainly helpful to us if we got y'all's perspective, because you guys deal more directly with the labs. I mean, the example that you gave of maybe even having to pull up a different methodology, an older methodology, and maybe 2 or 3 of them, you know, those real life specific examples can help us craft the implementation of it. Eventually, we're going to have to do something to tell EPA something about the MALs, but I do think we have some time. So, and then I think Janet had
supposed to cover
had some. Okay.
Yep, there were also some questions about 4 new parameters that were added to the water quality standards this last time around. And so they're not an EPA 40 CFR 136 method for those. And so what we're proposing on those is to have a believed or absent. You may have seen those tables in our current application for certain pollutants. If you don't believe it's there, if you don't have any industries that are, you know, have that as a product or a byproduct, we'll just have a box where you can put believed absent, and then you won't be subject to the analysis.
So which pollutants?
It's four new pollutants that were in the standards, and I'm just going to say one is ethyl glycol. The rest of them I'm going to butcher. So, yeah. Oh, MTBE. The other one's epichlorohydrin and 4,4-isopropyl.
Biphenyl A.
Yeah. Biphenyl A, yes. Okay. So,
But we'll have those
So,
on the website.
yeah, we didn't just make these up. But they are in the water quality standards now, but we do have an issue where there's not a 40 CFR approved method for those.
So is that going to be believed to not be present in the effluent, or not believed to be contributed by industries? Because BPA is coming from consumer
Everywhere.
uses, you know.
Yeah, so we want to focus on, in pretreatment, we want to focus on what you're getting. So the focus should be on if you have an industry that's making that product or has a byproduct, where you may have that in the waste stream.
Do y'all like that? Okay, I think that was a yes. All right, we'll make sure we get that up on the website too, I guess, Erica?
So I know that we did receive comment letters from the MUR work group and stakeholders that received that. I intentionally shared it with the entire pretreatment community that is listed on our pretreatment stakeholder distribution list, the proposed revisions to Appendix E of the procedures to implement the Texas Water Quality Standards. So you guys were involved in that comment period, that opportunity to provide feedback. And we did receive at least 3 individual letters specific to pretreatment. And so I do want you to know that your comments are being addressed, that all those responses to those comments are being drafted within the division. And I'm personally working with the work group to address all of those specific comments. So unless there's anyone else who wants to ask a question in the meeting today for any clarification or for us to talk about it as a group.
Well, I think if Jennifer or whoever else has anything else, maybe we can get it in the next 30 days. And then we can add it to the other ones that we received that Erica's talking about. Oh, okay. So you've submitted comments with what you mentioned. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Janet's and Jennifer's comments were included.
Okay.
Those specific items. Yes, ma'am. And so we're responding to those. But if anybody else would have anything else they'd like to talk about regarding the method update rule and our implementation of that, if not, we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the proposed revisions from 40 CFR Part 423 for the steam electric power generating point source category. And so, you know, our management, L'Oreal, really pushed for us to re-implement these stakeholder meetings because we really do value the time that we're able to spend together, because these meetings allow for us to collaborate and work together and share knowledge and expertise because, you know, us as the state, we want to provide the best customer service and share what we know. And so these meetings allow for us to do that. And so we really do value your input and participation. So thank you so much. And so one of the benefits of us being able to spend this time together is for us to share what we've learned or what we are aware of that's coming down the pipeline. And these proposed revisions to 40 CFR Part 423 are one of the things that we were made known about. And so we want to share what we've learned and just make sure that each of you are kept in the loop. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and she's going to share what we've learned so far.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to wrap up with going over some basic information from the updates to 40 CFR 423. So EPA is proposing revisions to the 2015 final rule that provided effluent guidelines for discharges from steam electric power plants, categorical industrial users that are subject to pretreatment categorical standards listed in 40 CFR Part 423. So the proposed revisions include new effluent limitations for flue gas desulfurization, FGD, wastewater, and bottom ash transport water discharged from existing steam electric power generator processes. The proposal would only affect FGD wastewater and BA transport wastewater limits, and the new rule does not propose to change any other limits for the other waste streams that are covered by the 2015 rule. The proposed rule would establish new effluent limitations based on best available technology, BAT, economically achievable for existing direct dischargers. So for the discharge of FGD wastewater, there will be two sets of BAT limitations, the first being numeric effluent limitation on total suspended solids, TSS. The second will be a numeric effluent limitation on mercury, arsenic, selenium, and nitrogen. For the discharge of bottom ash transport wastewater, there are two sets of BAT limitations, and that is a numeric limitation on total suspended solids and a limit not to exceed 10% of the volumetric purge limitation. So as indicated, those are for existing sources that are direct dischargers. The proposed rule also establishes pretreatment standards for indirect dischargers, those facilities discharging to POTWs, to be the same BAT limitations described above, except with the exception of TSS. The proposed rule also includes subcategories for high flow facilities, low utilization boilers, and facilities with boilers retiring by 2028. And those subcategories have additional numeric effluent limitations as well. Finally, the proposal also includes a voluntary incentives program, and this provides facilities more time up until December 31st, 2028 to adopt additional process changes and controls that would be able to achieve more stringent limitations on mercury, arsenic, selenium, nitrogen, bromide, and TSS in that FGD wastewater. So that is, we also have some handouts available of the fact sheet from EPA that goes over the proposed changes to the rule. So if you'd like one, feel free to come up afterwards, and we have a couple copies, and they're also available on the TCQ website. Were there any questions on the updates to the proposed rule?
Thank you so much, Jessica. So we really wanted to share this information with you all because we know that some of you guys do have some industries out there that are subject to the categorical pretreatment standards within this point source category. And so, you know, all of the pretreatment standards are self-implementing. And so when we were made aware that there were changes that would apply to the pretreatment community, we just wanted to share that information with you. So if there are no questions or comments regarding this particular agenda topic, we'd be more than happy to move into our question and answer portion. And so if anybody out there has any questions, or I don't know if Travis, we've received any emails, we'd be more than happy to address any questions or concerns at this time.
We don't have much from the webcast attendees. We did have one comment that came in from Bill Gase with the City of Garland. Bill just adds that the new MALs would require a lab to have multiple calibrations to cover all of the target analyses in the method.
Okay. Thank you so much for that comment, Bill. I will definitely make sure that it's funneled to our MUR work group, and we will address that concern. But thank you so much for sharing with us. Did anybody else have any questions? Okay, Danielle, I see you.
I have a question on the electronic reporting. I know the deadline was this year. I don't know if that's been changed, and kind of just give us an update on that, where you're at.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brooke. So yes, so we did receive, I guess, a delay from EPA on implementing the electronic reporting rule. And so the TCEQ decided when this rule came down the pipeline to not develop our own database for complying with this rule. We are working with EPA for them to develop that database for us. And so the status update on that is we have not gotten anything back from any, opportunity to beta test that database development. Pretreatment is lumped into all of the other components of the agency that have to comply with the electronic reporting rule. So once we do know that database is up for testing, or we move past that stage, we'll definitely update you all. But as far, there are no updates from September. I was involved in a call with EPA and their developers on what specifically pretreatment needs. dates, and then they stepped aside to start that development of that database. We have not gotten any feedback other than that. So once we know more, we'll definitely update and share with you all. But as far as complying by 2020, there has been an extension granted, so we do not have to comply by that date. So we'll be working internally to revise any, permit language or just, have a plan in place for when we will resume that compliance schedule for the agency.
Erica, I think it would be a good idea if, as a part of our regular item on the agenda, if we have any federal updates, we can share with the group. Yes? Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, L'Oreal. Were there any other questions or comments or concerns?
I have a question. I know the sludge 312 rules are under revision. They've been put out. At one time, the metals concentrations were proposed to be reviewed and updated to be consistent with the federal regs. And I've been told that will not happen. And I was wondering, have y'all reviewed how that would impact technically based local limits? Because if you have a Class A sludge, the selenium limit is going to be your critical factor in what your local limit for selenium is. And it would be nice if we could have 100 milligrams per kilograms instead of the 36 that's in the Texas regs.
So my understanding of how this all came about was EPA had proposed more stringent limits for selenium, and can't remember what the other parameters were. But before they could promulgate, they backed off on those. And TCEQ being proactive, we had proposed the same changes that EPA had proposed, and we moved forward with those and got those changes put into our rules. The state can be more stringent than the federal requirements. And so we have those on the books now. And so if there are, a good way of determining if there were issues for the for biosolids for Class A would be the current analysis. We could look at that to see if anyone's had any issues meeting that more stringent requirement.
The reason they're meeting the more stringent requirement and they have good Class A is because pretreatment programs are doing their job and they have stringent local limits in their ordinances. Is that, if it's burdensome for the industries, and it's not scientifically, apparently it can't be scientifically proven that we need 36, or else EPA wouldn't have backed off on their proposed limit. So is it really scientifically defensible for Texas to have a more stringent limit for selenium in the sludge rules than what EPA has?
I'd have to go back and take a look and see why they backed off on why they had proposed and why they backed out.
And there was litigation involved with that.
Go ahead. Yeah. I was saying, isn't there a new water quality standard for selenium? That was my question.
Yeah, but this is the sludge requirement, and so it's a little different.
And if you were to calculate technically based local limits using the water quality standard, it would be higher than what it would result in if you have a Class A sludge. It would be much more stringent.
I like David's suggestion where we can maybe go back and look at the history a little bit, talk to our sludge staff.
Yeah, we can go back and take a look and see. I mean, we of course don't want to have a limit in there that's not scientifically defensible. So we'll take a look at that, and if we have the ability to make some changes this time around with the rule where it is, we'll explore that.
Hey, Erica. I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit because right now y'all have 5 of my wastewater treatment plants and my stormwater permit, and I don't want to slow any of that down. I put in a non-substantial modification for the dental industrial user portion. Since we've done that, I've actually developed a website where dentists can go in and basically fill out all the information, print it off, and then send it in. But I didn't include that as part of my non-substantial modifications because I didn't have that at the time. Do I need to follow up, or I don't want to slow down my process on the approvals on my treatment plant permits for sure, but if we do develop something that's another tool like a website-based stuff, do you want us to just send that in addition to the list of questions? Because I've already did the non-substantial once, but.
Absolutely. So I know you have a couple. I'll go ahead and address that one for you. So thank you so much, Martin. Your non-substantial modification for the dental form, it should be effective. Like, I know we have to complete our review within 45 days and either approve or not approve, or at least request more time from you guys. So that form that you're going to use or that you propose to use should be a part of your program now. It won't delay any permit actions because the non-substantial modification approval process is not tied to a permit action. Although we do like to have that documentation in the permit language, it's not required in order for you to implement it with your program. So there won't be any delays regarding that. But let's talk more about the website because I just want to make sure that you're Chrome Air compliant and that we abide by that element for the use of that website with your program, okay? So I just have some follow-up questions that I'll be more than happy to talk to you offline about, okay? Did you have any other questions, Martin?
No, I just don't want to slow down my permit process.
Absolutely.
I don't want you to slow down your permitting process.
And we won't slow down your permits. We want to get those issued on time because we have LBB measures and, permit tracking time frames, so we won't delay that. Absolutely.
I actually have a suggestion. And this is regards to the way forms are implemented into the programs. And Erica, I think we kind of briefly talked about this a while ago, but and I'm like Martin, I don't want to mess up with anything getting my programs approved right now, but I was wondering for future consideration, instead of us submitting the form, we just submit the minimum requirements in writing in our SOP that the form has to contain. For a multi-jurisdictional program, one of the things I find is I feel like I'm constantly submitting non-substantial modifications if somebody wants to add a question. And they're really making it more stringent by adding a question. So I'd just be curious if that could be something maybe moving forward. I could see it as a way of cutting down on the number of non-substantial modifications we have to do and the amount that y'all would have to review. I don't know if at audit time maybe you could come in and say, okay, forms have to have this minimum requirement, look at the form, oh, it does, and then move on.
So thank you so much, Jennifer, for that feedback. And I can only imagine what it's like, as Trinity River Authority or any river authority out there with all the contracting parties or customer cities. It can be a lot. So I definitely understand. And I appreciate your feedback. I really do like that idea. It would definitely help with our workload. So I would love to discuss with management, how we can meet in the middle. But there is a standard that we do have to at least continue, the way the program was implemented when we received delegation from EPA. And so there's a lot of phases that we would have to do in order to implement a change like that. But I personally really like and appreciate that idea. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think I don't know, because pretreatment is different, but it sounds like something we can work through. I think it's a good idea. And we're all trying to avoid lots of changes to the program that are unnecessary. So, as I understand, your suggestion, Jennifer, was to have the minimum elements, and so if you add something, you don't want to have to come back in for a minor modification if it's not critical, I guess. So, yeah, let's explore that.
Did anyone else have any questions or comments or concerns? The feedback that we're having really right now is really great. And so thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your expertise with us.
I think Janet had one more.
I was going over the information from the last meeting. And one of the discussions for the effluent testing was regarding hexavalent chromium and also amenable cyanide. If our total values are less than the MAL, is there any way that TCEQ would let us not have to do the hexavalent chromium or the amenable cyanide? Since if your total's less than, shouldn't your hexavalent chromium be less than? And shouldn't your amenable cyanide be less than?
That sounds like a very specific question. Maybe we can talk offline. Okay.
This was part of the discussion we had in the last meeting.
You have an answer for her?
I don't have an answer for that particular question, Janet, but that's something that I'd be more than happy to discuss with you after the meeting. But we have brought up and been talking about it internally. So we can definitely talk more offline.
Mm-hmm. And we do that, something similar to that in industrial permitting. So it sounds reasonable.
Were there any other questions or comments or concerns?
Yeah, is there any way to get this air turned off before the next meeting? I think I missed half of what everybody said.
Okay. Absolutely. We'll get with facilities and see what we can do to make it more comfortable. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say that all of our stakeholder meetings, when they're webcast, we do post them on the TCEQ YouTube page. So if you just go on YouTube, search TCEQ News, this meeting as well as all of our other stakeholder meetings that we've had recently will be available at that location.
No, we're sorry you couldn't hear very well with the air conditioning. Sometimes we don't control those things, though, but we'll try.
Well, I know the DWAG is looking at a different view.
Yeah, probably the webcast aspect of it. That's why we're in this room. And then last time we filled up the room with pretreatment stakeholders, and so we'll save a place for you up front.
Yeah, right. Gotta get here earlier.
No. There's a place up front. All right. Or you can sit here next to me. Anyway, well, thank you guys so much. We'll be around. Oh, yes.
I would like to say to mirror Jennifer, since my time in pretreatment, the interaction and response we've gotten with the current team is drastically improved. Oh. And it's been a great benefit to us to be able to talk to them and reach them, to be able to understand where our programs are, what's happening with that. You know, in Dallas, we submitted our streamlining rule 7 years ago, going on 8, you know, and nothing was ever happening. And since then, since Region 6 in August, they're like, boom, we've got it. And we're at that final step where we're waiting on council to close it out. So it's been a huge change, and it's definitely appreciated. One thing I would ask from y'all is that when it comes to audits, and not to say this is a problem with the current staff, but audit findings aren't consistently applied across the different programs. One program will be found in violation for the same thing that another program won't be. And it's really tough for us as control authorities to get a handle on it when I know I'm in trouble, but Jennifer is not getting dinged for the same thing, right? Or vice versa, or just understanding that the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, you know, it helps us as control authorities to better implement our programs the way that we are intending them to be done.
So, first of all, thank you for that feedback, and I'm gonna give a shout out to the staff. Consistency is very important, and I was talking about that earlier. When from the time we receive the application in our review process, and we want to treat everybody the same. It's I think that's very important to us, and that's why, as the, I guess, the state regulator, we need to make sure our processes and methods are tight so that we can treat everybody the same in our technical reviews, and then when that moves to the audit process. Now, I don't know if you guys have been audited recently by our new team, and maybe you have, I don't know. But if there's inconsistencies, you know, we'd like to know what those are. And I think what we've done with the audit process, if I remember correctly, we've done an overhaul of that as well. I think what we're doing is a desktop review initially, so that we can be more efficient when we're on site. And I think we're also asking for information to be submitted ahead of time, submitting that electronically to us, again, so that we can be more efficient and also consistent. And that's true. All of the pretreatment staff is new, right, in the last couple years, except for, well, even Erica. I think Erica's coming up on 2 years almost in May-ish. So there's some growing pains with us as well, you know, because all of our staff are brand new, and it's a learning process, but we want to strive to be consistent. And so if there's some areas where you, talking amongst yourselves or whatever, you find that we're not, we want to hear about that so that we can fix that, because that is ultimately our goal. We want to treat everybody the same.
And thank you so much, Joseph, for sharing that with us. And so if there are any specific concerns, because I think you in 2017, I believe the city of Dallas was audited. And so I'd be more than happy to look into that and more in depth if there's any questions regarding the audit findings or violations from that report issued at that time. But I know that is something that my staff and I have worked really hard on. We use all the same checklists. We try to be, we're very consistent in our initial, interview, our exit meeting. So we're doing our very best. And so going on 2 years, it'll be 2 years coming up in a couple of months. And I believe, Bridget, you're older than me, maybe by a couple of months, and everybody else younger. We're definitely, that's a big priority to us, because that is our enforcement branch of the program. And so we take that consistency very seriously. So was there anything in specific?
No, there's nothing in specific to my last audit. It's just, again, previous staff has been inconsistent in their audit findings. So some programs would be required to do things that are in addition to what other programs aren't being required to. So that consistency there really helps us out. It's not really fair that I have to do something extra that nobody else does, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes at a monetary expense for additional testing, staff, et cetera, or I get penalized in NOV or a major audit finding, And again, it's nothing to do with this new team. It's just a general comment of, hey, can we get a little more consistency, because it helps us out. And again, I haven't been audited since Erica first come on board. Mm-hmm. And it was a good time there. It went over pretty smoothly. So,
but I appreciate that, because I think that's we should have that as a daily goal, to be consistent. And with all of the 72-ish pretreatment programs, big or small, and certainly Dallas may have 10 plants or one major plant, or it may be different compared to a small city, but our processes and methodologies need to be the same. And again, I want to reiterate that not only with the audits, but also in how we do our pretreatment permit reviews, local limit development, et cetera. We need to be consistent. Y'all are warming up.
It's the end now. Just a confirmation from the last time, Erica, we had talked about the dental dischargers and the application of SNC for them, in that we're supposed to publish a list of everyone who's in SNC. So one of the requirements is if they submit a report that's more than 30 days late, that's technically SNC. But from what I understood the last time, it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to publish dental users in SNC. Is that correct still?
Yes, ma'am. So thank you so much, Denise, for bringing up that question. So as far as us at the TCUQ requiring programs to have any enforcement action regarding dental users, we're allowing you to make that determination. So yes, there is a reporting requirement associated with the rule. Our FAQ and what the TCUQ's perspective is that we're not going to require you guys to enforce, whether that be publication of, SNC or however you follow your enforcement response plan or procedures in your program. That's up to you guys to determine how you want to regulate that additional industrial user. So you aren't required to make them categorical. You aren't required to, publish an SNC unless that's what you choose to do with your program. And all that we've asked is that your program be consistent with whatever it is you want it to be. So if you have to revise your ERP to account for dental users, if you want to use a different enforcement response plan for dental users specifically, you would want to submit that to us for our review and approval into your program. So any changes like that, we're leaving that up to you guys to make, the enforcement, how you plan to enforce. But as far as requiring you guys to publish an SNC, no, that's your call. Did that? Yes, ma'am.
And to just clarify, so you're not going to want us to say in our ERP, any industrial user except dental dischargers who are more than 30 days late need to be an SNC, right? We don't have to make that change, or?
So if your current ERP addresses any industrial user, because dental offices are not significant industrial users and they're not categorical unless your program designates them as such. And I'm so sorry, I hear the AC, I'm so sorry. You can move if you want to. Feel free to relocate so you can hear us. So no, unless you are, your ERP says anything for industrial users across the board, that's where we probably need to have this conversation and clarify. Because when we do audit, and what our expectation is that you all are implementing your approved program as written and approved. And so if in your approved program you have something for enforcement, of IUs, whether they're permitted, whether they're significant, categorical, et cetera, that we're relying on you guys to be the experts of the implementation of your program. And so I don't believe in your particular case with GCA that it goes down to the industrial user level, which is what we designate dental offices as. But if there are any programs out there that do, or if Denise, I'm in fact wrong, please let me know, because we would want your program to be consistent. Because future audits, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at what your program says and what you are doing on the ground and making sure that they match. And that is one thing that we evaluate, making sure that programs follow their approved ERP.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Since we were talking about the audits, we got audited in December, but all the staff, they did a very, very good job. It was a very cooperative effort. We had some mistakes. They found it, and we discussed it. We want to make our program better. So that's how we vision the audit should be. And we had a good experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, I think that's it. And Travis, we didn't have any other comments. You had something else, David?
No. Nothing else from the webcast attendees.
Okay. Oh, there's one more.
Yeah, just before we conclude, from the City of Houston, would like to acknowledge and give kudos to the great work you've been doing on our technical TBLLs.
Oh, wow.
You're waiting on the streamlining rule modification approval, but yeah, it's been great.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, Tammy, Jessica, thank you. And we are so close to your streamlining. I wanted it done before this meeting so that we could say, we did Houston all the way. But we're excited to be able to say that to everyone. So thank you so much.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. I think, Erica, when's the next meeting?
The next meeting is June 4th, Thursday, June 4th, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. in the same room.
Okay.
And of course, the front row is always open. So if anybody can't hear, if it's too cold, we'd love to have you in the front. And thank you, Aaron, for your work on the TBLLs. I got the name wrong, so my apologies. Thank you all for coming.